Hey, it's Lisa. I wanted to share with you just a little bit about why I made this video. So when I was 25, I had my first real crisis of faith. I grew up with a really strong belief in God, and I believed that He was unconditionally loving and that He was all powerful. And for the first time in my life, I started to really question these facts. During this time, I was working with a ministry that was helping women wanting to make a big change in their life. I talked about this a little bit before in a previous video, but basically these women were coming out of the sex industry and wanted to make a new life and a new career for themselves. And a lot of them were having a really difficult time, and within months or even weeks going right back into the old lifestyle that they had just come out of. Because something had happened to them. Because of all the trauma they had been through, they started to believe these lies about themselves, these lies that they couldn't do anything else, that they weren't worth anything more. And we weren't able to change their lives until we first changed their heart issues. Well, near the beginning of the ministry, when we hadn't figured this stuff out yet, my life started to make a major turn in the wrong direction. Just the entire blueprint of what I thought my life should look like didn't match up with reality. You know, I had worked really hard. I wanted to be an actress, and I was part of this reality show that basically destroyed my career, or so I thought at the time, and nationally embarrassed me. I was going through my first breakup, my first really big heartbreak. Anybody who's gone through that knows it's so painful. And the biggest thing was that one of my friends had died in a car accident, leaving behind a newborn baby. And I thought, how can I look at all these circumstances and say that God is loving or in control when stuff like this is going on in the world? And the one thing that I felt like I did have, which was my ministry, even that now was crumbling. And I remember I was walking up to my room, and one of the girls stopped me and she asked me what was wrong because she had heard me crying the night before. And I remember going up to my room that night feeling so stupid. Because here I was supposed to be helping these girls, and I couldn't even help myself. And I remember praying to God, even though I didn't even know if He was real or listening. And I said, this is crazy. I don't belong here. I'm a fraud. I'm going home. There's no reason for me to be here. And I remember kind of hearing this voice saying, you can go home if you want to, but just recognize that you are reacting in the same way that these women are. I'm like, whoa, excuse me, this is a completely different situation. And he's like, no, it's not. These women believe lies about themselves, and because of it, they're unable to turn and get the help that they need. You are believing a lie far more dangerous. You believe a lie about me. And because of it, you're unable to turn to me to get the help that you need. See, the difference between the women who made no change in their life and the ones who went on to ultimate recovery was one choice. It was the same choice that I was faced with that night, and it's the same choice we're all faced with anytime that we have a rough situation. It's, am I going to choose to look at my circumstances and walk by sight based on my very limited scope of what I know right now? Or am I going to choose to walk by faith and trust that what God says about me and about Himself is true? That if He's powerful enough to place all the stars in the sky, and He loves us so much that He sent His Son to die in our place, then it must also be true that He is working all things together for our good. See, of all the stories that I know in Scripture, I cannot think of one that ends with God forgetting His people or His promises. Now, there are a lot of situations and stories in Scripture that I look at that it might have appeared that way for a small time to those characters. For example, let's take Sarah. She's promised that she's going to have a son, and it doesn't happen until she's 90 years old. That means for 90 years, there's people speculating and looking at her life and saying, see, yeah, God's not going to answer that promise. It's not even physically possible anymore. But we know that what is impossible with man is possible with God, and He did answer that promise at 90 years old. And she had her son. In the same way, you can say that when Christ died on the cross, there was a lot of things that God had promised the Messiah would do that He hadn't done yet. So for 3 days, it would have appeared as though God had not fulfilled His promise, or His promises. in that situation, but our foresight allows us to see that the reason it would have appeared that way is simply because the story wasn't finished yet. See, God took the most evil act in human history, the crucifixion of the Son of God, and turned it around for the redemption of all mankind. What man meant for evil, God meant for good. And in the same way, when you and I are facing circumstances that cause us to question, is God really going to be faithful here? And it doesn't look like he is. The reason it doesn't look that way is because the story isn't finished yet. See, I made a decision that night to trust God, even though I couldn't understand everything that was going on. And unfortunately, I wish I could tell you that I got all the answers right away, but I didn't. I don't know why I had to do that reality show that embarrassed me. I don't know why I had to go through that heartbreak, and I don't know why my friend had to pass away. But looking over the course of my life, what I do see consistently is that time and time again, God has demonstrated his love and his faithfulness in my life. And I have to continue to trust that. And I started the habit of journaling things when I do see the answers, or I see examples of God coming through in my life or the lives of my friends. I write it down so that when I face those hard times, I can look back at the track record and say, okay, if he's been faithful this much in the past, it makes sense he will continue to be faithful in the future. I also look at old stories in history and in biblical characters and renew my mind on those things so that when the enemy comes and he says, look at the news, look what's going on over here, look what's going on over there, God's not faithful. I can say, really? Tell that to David, and tell that to Noah, and tell that to Meshach and Shadrach and Abednego. My God is faithful. If you're facing a tough crisis in your life, or your life looks like, where is God in this situation? I want to encourage you that God is working all things together for your good, that he is turning things around in your favor. And if it doesn't appear that way, it's not because God has forgotten you, it's simply because the story is not finished yet. Make the decision to walk by faith instead of by sight, and I promise you, you will not be sorry. Have a blessed week.